Welcome to Savvy Survivor, the place for inspiration and information for people who finished their cancer treatment, those living with cancer, their providers, and caregivers. Meredith Mendelsohn here, co-founder, and today our guest is Gretchen Leigh. And Gretchen, why don't you tell us about your connection to cancer survivorship?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I am a sex educator located in Portland, Oregon. I work for a place called Shebop. I've been there for about 4 years as an educator. Shebop is a sex toy boutique. We specialize in having a lot of female-focused products and a really light, sort of educational, happy space. And we serve folks of all genders, all identities, all experiences. I've been working there in the shop for about 4 years, and then I've also been teaching all over the place for the last about 2.5 years. And through that work in education, and also through my mother, who has been a cancer survivorship specialist for quite a while, I sort of found my route into working with the medical community, both with providers and with folks going through a wide variety of medical experiences, and especially kind of settled into this niche of working with folks who are survivors of or experiencing cancer. So I've had the privilege of traveling all over and doing a lot of work with local cancer centers and specialists to teach about all sorts of topics related to survivorship.
Great. Tell us about what you think is the most important thing for us all to know about this topic.
Sure. I think that in terms of most important, I tend to break it down into sort of two different sides of this idea around sexuality. And one is the intimacy piece, which to me sounds like looking at someone's connection to their body, connection to maybe a partner, or whether that's a long-term partner or like dating and new relationships, and the ability to foster intimacy after a major life change. And that is something that when we go through something like cancer can significantly shift. And then on the other side of that, we look at the actual physicality of sex. And when you go through something like chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, or even just like a change in your body of any kind, that might change the way you do things that at one point you had like a routine for, a system for, you knew how they were going to work. And when your body really changes, that really changes that. So being able to look at sexuality not just as like if X then Y sort of situation, but looking at like, I have this whole intimate emotional self and I have this whole sexual self, and there might be changes and experiences on both sides of that, and finding care for both pieces and looking at the human as like a whole self when it comes to sexuality. I think that's something that gets lost in the medical world, and it is something that's really important to me as an educator.
Right. What would you recommend as a way to kind of get started if you wanted to get more information and some help with sexuality and intimacy?
Sure. I think it seems really simple, but just bringing it up, even though it might be a little bit uncomfortable or a little bit awkward or seem like maybe someone else should be the one who brings it up, as a patient, as someone seeking care, just pushing that door open a little bit, even with something like, are there any resources available on intimacy, or is there anyone I could talk to about issues around sexuality? And then maybe your provider will surprise you and say like, oh, I'm happy to talk about that. Sure. Or if not, like they might be able to provide you with another resource out there. But I would say like it is always appropriate. And I myself would encourage people so much to like advocate for yourself and your body and your experience. And just because someone didn't bring it up doesn't mean it's not important. So starting that conversation, you can also, a resource that I would recommend would be looking into something called the PPC, the Progressive Pleasure Club, which is across the country, a whole bunch of sex toy retailers and education centers like Shebop that are all committed to having a strong, educated, caring staff and stocking products that are all body safe, safe to use, and that their staff would know a lot about. Being able to research a shop like that and even just call or go in, talk to an educator, talk to someone who works there and get resources that way can be a super useful way to start.
And how would you suggest providers kind of bring this topic up?
Absolutely. More or less the same. I would say if a patient is not bringing up issues around sexuality and intimacy, it's possible that they don't have any, that everything is peachy keen and awesome. But I would always say it's a better idea to ask and be sure than to just assume that if someone's not talking about something, it's not a problem. So opening that door in the same way, like, are you interested in any resources around sexuality and intimacy? Or saying like, have you, just like you would with any other intake question or a checkup of like, and how is that arm feeling? Say like, how is your sex life going? It's sometimes people experience changes and wondering if there's anything you'd like to talk about related to that. Being someone who can comfortably open the door, whether it's then going to be you providing resources or connecting someone, I think can be totally invaluable. And also as a provider, being someone who yourself has gone into a sex toy store, has done your research on what the resources are, who has gone through that experience yourself, so that you then can relate to a patient on that level, instead of saying like, oh, I've heard there's some places you could go and check it out. I know so many people that when their route to a place like Babeland in Seattle or Shebop in Portland, when their route to that is like, my oncologist sent me, or my doctor sent me, or someone suggested I could come here, they don't really know what to expect, and there's a lot of fear there. And that will be a big hold someone back from actually coming in. So if a provider could say like, I've been to this place and checked it out, they were really friendly, they've got a lot of great products, and like, I'd recommend you go there too. That might give someone one more little step of access and feeling like they could seek out that resource.
Great. And it sounds like you probably have a lot of resources for us
I
that
do.
you can give us.
Yeah.
These will be located in the resource tab right underneath the video
Awesome.
on the website. Any other things you think we should know about sexuality and intimacy?
I think the main thing is just to know that, like, even though sexuality is something that we don't talk about a whole lot in our day-to-day lives, I guess depending on who your community is or who your friends are, but it's not something that is necessarily our casual dinner table conversation. If you are struggling or something has changed or something feels different than it used to be or not normal or anything like that, that you are not alone. And also that there are absolutely people out there who are not just willing to talk about it, but super excited to talk about it, or that it is our whole job to talk about it. And I think I'm connected to a community of sex educators that, surprisingly, we all get pretty good work out there in the world and people do hire us. But that we have resources out there like websites, like books that we've written, like all sorts of things, because this is a topic that needs to be addressed. And that we all see it as something that is so paramount to the human experience for so many people. And just that if this is something that is a sticking point for you or something you're experiencing, that you're not alone, and that there are always going to be resources out there for you.
Terrific. Well, thank you for sharing your vast knowledge with us today. And
Absolutely.
I think we've only scratched the surface. Thanks again also for making yourself available to people. So there'll be a link for folks to email you.
Yeah, absolutely. Always happy to answer questions. And like I've said, if I'm not the one with the resource, happy to pass along to someone who I think might be able to answer better.
Wonderful. Thank you again so much.
Absolutely.